And here to help us celebrate the end of the year, it's Mr. Clark Howard. I'm so honored you're here with us, man. Thank you.
It's so cool to end the year, get us ready for a new year, because 22 has got to be better than the last 2 years. Man.
Isn't that
We've
wild?
been through it, haven't we?
We have totally been through it. Well, and you and I were even talking about this upstairs with Mom about how our football teams haven't helped either, brother. The Atlanta Falcons and the Detroit Lions. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, we're both pitiful. But, you know, we have won 5 more games than you've won.
Oh, now you're pouring salt in it. Next year. But I've been saying that my entire life. So
right.
I don't know. Just overarching, Clark, what are your thoughts as we close out 2021? Really, I mean, such a weird year. You see Charlie Munger a couple weeks ago talking about how the stock market to him seems weirder than it was in 1999. And
Right.
you and I both thought it was weird in 1999. And we've had so much change this year. All this just weird investing patterns. I mean, we started off with meme stocks and all through that, but just generally, what's your thought as we close out 2021?
I think I'm optimistic. And the reason I'm optimistic is you think about what life has thrown at us since March of 20 and how versatile we are, how adaptable we are, how we overcome. I mean, you look at us as individuals, how we deal with it, how companies deal with it, and we are more capable of dealing with life's curveballs than we give ourselves credit for. We proved it again and again. And I think about with those latest variant, Omicron,
yeah,
whatever you want to call it. All right, I'll just call it the latest variant.
The thing.
That there were all these predictions how it was going to take the economies of the world in the toilet again, and the airlines were going to have no passengers and all that. It hadn't played that way at all because people learn to live with the circumstances that life presents them. And that's what we've been doing. And yeah, the stock market in the United States is stupid. I mean, and the stock market over time is brilliant. When the short term, the stock market is always dumb up or down. And the values right now make no sense by any rational measurement. And so I have been doing a lot of investing outside the United States where the values are much more normal than they've been here. But I'm not leaving the United States. You know, I still have big positions in the United States because the fact that they're overvalued now just means we're going to have reversion to mean. We're going to have lower returns moving forward. Could be, painful declines like happened after 1999 to the NASDAQ, or it could be just things stay sluggish for many years to come. But where else do you go? Because being an owner of capitalism, being an owner of enterprises is where you got to be for long-term financial security, long-term growth of your money. And yeah, people have had ridiculous returns if you go back to 2009 through this year. And eventually the marketplace says, hey, those numbers make no sense. And it gets back to more normal numbers. But that doesn't mean gloom and doom because people have ended up with these large gains. And just as March of last year, when we went through all these shutdowns and people were predicting that we would have like 1918, 1919, that perhaps 100 million people would die around the world. Nobody was thinking about modern medicine, modern science, and how we are learning to deal with and treat. I mean, we've had tragic loss in the United States, over 800,000 people dead. And that's terrible. But we are piece by piece, step by step, learning how to live with it. And COVID will be like a seasonal flu. It has not been to this point, but it will be. And commerce will continue. People will get married. They'll have kids. They'll take trips. I mean, we will get back to normal from it because that's what human beings do. We overcome and we endure. And I think that's the message I want people to think about as we turn to 22 is we are going to be fine. And yes, it has been terrible. And if you lost a loved one, you lost a grandparent, whatever, to COVID, it was horrible. And a lot of people suffered loss of income who worked in jobs that shut down, March through, I guess, June last year.
Yeah.
But people now average person has more money in their account today than they did before COVID. I mean, we do adapt. And that's the thing. There's always people talking gloom and doom, gloom and doom, gloom and doom. We're better than that. And we're going to prove it. And we already have.
Well, let's jump in then, my friend, on that positive glasses 3/4 full note. Let's go with the stock market as our first thing. Stock market, as we do this, S&P 500 up about 25% this year, right? It sounds like the takeaway we should learn from 2021, or maybe that we need to learn or need to remember based on what you're saying about global investments, investing everywhere, is that diversification still matters.
Diversification is key. There are people who have gamblers' personalities, and you look at the amount of money people are borrowing on margin, and I get upset for them. That people are borrowing these enormous amounts of money on margin, betting that the market's going to keep climbing to the sky and beyond. And so why not double your bet and borrow money so you can be in it more?
Woo-hoo!
But as we know, when the market turns, it just tears you apart. So investing already in the short term is a bit of a gamble. Long term, it's not. Borrowing money to invest, a gamble, in my opinion, always. And so when people think of investing as being today, part of today, this week, this month, and they don't think long term and they don't diversify, you're creating so much risk for yourself that may look good and feel good in the short term, but eats you up longer term. So diversifying internationally, domestically, wide. I'm such a believer in something Chuck Schwab said forever ago. We never hear his name anymore, do we?
We don't, and we should, because so much wisdom came out of that man's mouth.
So he's the one who's all about, you want to play around with some of your money, go ahead. But you start with the base of having well-diversified, low-cost funds first. Kind of like the Bogle idea, except Bogle would have you do that and nothing else.
Right.
And that's fine too. But what I keep seeing, particularly with younger investors, is they're doing these big bets. And they're doing them on very narrow sectors, even just a handful of stocks. And that scares me. The options trading that a lot of younger investors are doing right now, it really concerns me. My dad was a professional investor. He had worked on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange as a kid. And in the 80s, he got into doing options trading. He thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to make a fortune. Then this is ancient history to most people, but Black Friday happened.
Oh, yeah.
With the stock market in 87, 40% drop in value. All the options got wiped out. He lost a lot of money. He never did that again. And so you got to be careful every time you try to leverage a bet and narrow the options you're doing. I'm never into betting on the fifth horse in the fourth race. I want to bet on the overall picture, and that makes me dull. And I admit, I am the dullest person alive, but I like to have money, and it really works to be dull and steady as you go with investing. I am the turtle with investing.
More fun to be dull when you have cash.
Yes, it
More
is.
fun. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and here's another question. As you're talking, I'm thinking about the change, not just in 2021, but the last two and a half years, this change now to zero fee brokerages, right? Mm-hmm. And we see this gambling mentality at the same time. And I can't help but think that one kind of led to the other. Are we having some unintended consequences of the fact that fees are zero? So people feel like they can bet with no consequence.
Well, Robinhood did something great democratizing investing, that you could be anybody with any amount of money and you could invest. And it's like so much of American society since 1978, this movement towards deregulating things, opening everything up. We have this endless series of choices now, and it is definitely democratizing. You look at air travel, go back before it was deregulated, only the wealthiest could ever get on an airplane. There was like no air service. Right. The government decided when you fly and all that. And we opened it up, and the marketplace opened up. You can take industry after industry, and stock trading, if you go back then, it was only for the very wealthy, because a trade was like $400,
right?
And not in today's dollars. It was $400 in the dollars back then to do a simple trade. And so when you get the freedoms we have with the financial market, with most anything now, comes with it a process you have to go through where you say, well, just because I could do that, maybe that wasn't the best idea. And so people are going to have to make those mistakes. They're going to have to learn, because I'd rather people have the freedom of the marketplace and learn, maybe I shouldn't be betting on all these cryptos, or maybe I shouldn't be buying stock in GameStop or AMC or whatever, because I'm going to make a zillion % in the next 6 hours. And so, but people should have the ability to make those decisions, make those choices. Were they good for them that they could do this? A lot of people have shown that wasn't the best idea for them.
And it's funny you say that, because as you're talking, I'm also thinking about how excited I get about people in their 20s talking about investing, right? And maybe, to your point, in the wrong way. But the fact is, maybe once they touch that stove and they get burned, then it's way better than where I started with, which I learned about credit card debt at an early age, which was bad. I think we already got, just in a couple sentences there, your view of our next topic from 2021, which is the rise of crypto and NFTs. And you're just, Dane, it sounds like, though, is on the betting. So let's not talk about the betting, because I feel the same way. But what about the technology and the fact that with NFTs now, we have this exciting way to prove ownership and make the system maybe work better? Do you like cryptos and NFTs from the technology standpoint?
100%. And from the very beginning, when Bitcoin was first a little baby, I loved I don't like how much energy it uses to produce. That's upsetting to me. But the underlying architecture, the blockchain technology, the ability to break the cartel of the banks and movement of money around the world, where these very large money center banks, both US and overseas, are able to basically take a cut. They're almost like bookies, where no matter what you want to do, the banks are in there messing up the free market, taking a ransom of every transaction that happens. So I love the underlying architectures we're talking about, because it cuts this inefficient, backwards, just terrible intermediary out of the system. And so what will come from this, it's almost like you mentioned the 1999 stock market thing.
Yeah.
And there were all these crazy ideas, companies that were losing a lot of money, and the more money they lost, the more people were paying for their stocks. But what came out of the dot bomb was all the great technology companies of today. So out of this era that is this Wild West 1849 gold rush kind of thing with the NFTs and the cryptos, what will come out of it is a better, more democratic payment system in the United States and in the world. So I think it will have a very good result. But the reason I just pick on crypto so much is, if the idea is it's an alternative way of having money, you want stability in the value. But people are playing the cryptos as a gambling thing, a speculative thing. And so the values go crazy up and down every day. If it's an actual real form of payment, you would be able to use it to buy things and sell them. And it would have a value that you could trust for more than the next 3 minutes. And so we are in that early formative stage. We're in the pioneering stage of something that's going to be very useful later. But right now, it's just like a carnival sideshow.
Yeah. Next up on my list of events from 2021, man, this last quarter, the inflation number came out about a week and a half ago. And obviously a lot of this is supply chain related, but inflation, I think for some of our younger listeners, this is the first time they've seen this, right? Prices. I went to the grocery store last week and I felt like I bought nothing, Clark. I felt like I bought nothing, spent $170.
Well, I shop at Aldi, If you're familiar with Aldi,
Yeah,
it's where really cheap people like me go and buy their groceries. And what's terrible is I go into Aldi now and it's crowded all the time because of the inflation in the supermarkets. People are just pouring into Aldi and their smaller U.S. competitor Lidl. They're both German companies. And so there's not as much merchandise available because so many more people are buying it. And I'm having to wait in these longer checkout lines. I mean, I got to get rid of this inflation so I can have my Aldi and my Lidl back because it's really frustrating. But you look at the supermarkets and there's two stories going on. You have the regional supermarkets that are having trouble stocking their shelves and the price points are going way up. And then you've got Walmart, which accounts for like 22% of groceries sold in the United States. And the inventory levels in their stores are great. And they have been willing to sacrifice margins, profits, to hold the prices down. So the gap now with Walmart and the regional supermarket chains is the largest it's ever been in price. And so a lot of people look at grocery shopping at Walmart as trading down. People are trading down, but they're finding the inventory and they're finding the much lower prices. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. People adapt. People find out how to deal with unexpected, unhappy circumstances. When the cost of one thing in the supermarket is too high, you buy something else. And that's how we adapt as humans. So the other thing is the Federal Reserve caused a lot of this, and the Congress did as well over the last 2 years, pumping so much money in the economy. Federal Reserve keeps signaling they're going to stop it. They're emptying the punch bowl. And a lot of the inflation that has been produced by too much money being out there in the marketplace, the Federal Reserve has the power, if they act soon enough, to dial that back and get the inflation under control. And the supply chain that has fed into inflation, piece by piece, the supply chain haphazardly is going to steadily get better through 22. We're going to see dramatic improvement in some industries in the first half of the year. And I think overall, we'll see meaningful improvement by the third quarter of 22. And so you have these two things, too much money being thrown in and the disruptions from the distribution system, both feeding inflation. Third factor we haven't talked about yet, and that's the Great Resignation. But two of the big drivers of inflation are things, thank goodness, that are going to come under control.
When it comes to, I want to get to the Great Resignation here in a second, but before we go there, if the Federal Reserve does start to move, it certainly seems to me, I mean, obviously that's going to be an interest rate move upward. Is this another ringing bell that if we don't have a debt strategy yet, you'd better get one? Like if you've got debt now, Clark, I have this feeling that, man, the interest rates on every single thing you buy are going to go sky high.
Yeah. So I just did this on my podcast. We were talking about it. Was I being Daddy Clark or was I being Uncle Clark? Nagging people about their debts. And with the variable interest rate debts like credit cards, personal loans, that they're going to get their clock cleaned if they're running big balances on variable rate debt, and home equity lines as well with the floating rates, because they are able, by the terms of the deal with you, typically on 30 days notice or within one billing cycle, to raise the interest rate by whatever formula they're using. And you're just going to see the amount of money you're paying in a month that was going towards interest and the amount going towards principal much more heavily go towards interest and less is going to go towards principal. So this is a fair warning. You want to do everything you can to reduce your credit card debt, any debt that has variable rate.
Is as a saver. Let's go the other side of that. You know, when I was in debt, the thing that made me angry and made me want to get out of debt quicker was I didn't like being an asset on somebody else's balance sheet, right? Sure. I did not like that. But let's talk about this. 7-point-something% I bond right now, right? I can get 7% from the government, where 6 months ago, if my savings account was paying 0.5%, I was awfully happy. How do you feel about that?
I've been singing the praises of the I-bonds ever since it became clear that we were going to go through a 6-month cycle with an effective rate of over 7%. And it's going to take a while for the inflation to wean out, and you get the rate of inflation. You get no return beyond the rate of inflation, but because you get 0% on your money plus the rate of inflation. But it's going to be a good holding for 1 year. You forfeit some time period, but more for a 5-year period, likely. Holding those Series I savings bonds are going to be great. So I've been telling people, hey, how many kids you got? We got 2. All right, so you can buy 20,000 there, and you buy 10 for you. You're married, you got another 10. You got 40 grand right there, earning a much higher rate of interest than you can earn anywhere else right now.
Absolutely fantastic. Let's go to the one that you mentioned, the Great Resignation. We have a lot of businesses struggling, but we also have a lot of people going, you know what? I think it might be time for me to make a move, make a change. What's our lesson here with the Great Resignation?
Well, see, I'm thrilled with this because the management has had too much power over labor in the United States for about the last 40 years. And effectively, you know, we talk about the income inequality, the spread in money in people's hands, the owners versus the workers. And now supply and demand is out of balance. There is more demand for workers than we got workers. And this is an opportunity that we haven't seen in 2 generations for workers to be able to boost their pay. It was just the other day, I think it was Hobby Lobby boosted starting pay minimum to $17.50 an hour.
Wow.
And a number of organizations to $20 an hour now. And this is good stuff. I mean, people worry that this is going to feed inflation. The reality is the pie has not been sliced to labor in an equitable fashion for a long time. And if you just sit where you are, your employer likely isn't going to say, you know what? I just love these people who work here. Let me give them a lot more money. And that's why people are hearing from a friend, hey, I just got a new job here, there, or everywhere, and they're paying me this much. And you're like, wait a minute. I'm smarter than that person. I'm a better worker than them, and I'm making a third less than they are. I got to go test the market. And I think that's what you got to do. It's brutal if I'm a small business owner.
Yeah.
Because when you think about where people are heading for the exits the most, it's from small businesses that can't have the benefits and generally the pay of larger enterprises, not necessarily the giant companies, but at least larger ones. And that forces them to either make do with a fewer number of workers, less workers, or to pay whoever remains more money so they don't go away as well.
Man, the last thing I have on my list, I have one more, and I don't really want to end it. Well, we won't end it on a down note. We'll find a happy note after this. But you know, we just had tornadoes rip apart America. We've had some horrible things happen here. We've had horrible things. You talked about COVID earlier in the year.
Yeah.
You know, I remember talking to a documentarian maybe 5 years ago who was talking about end of life, and he had this wonderful, horrible phrase that destruction doesn't happen at the end of your story. Things always happen in the middle of your story, and that you never know when things are going to happen. And I know you've always had strong feelings about risk management, about what to do with insurances, about kind of walking that tightrope. What's our lesson from 2021?
Well, first of all, to the people of the Mid-South, and especially the people of Kentucky, that was incredibly horrible. And I was in Joplin, Missouri after the horrific tornado there, doing radio and TV after that tornado. And I had never with my own eyes seen destruction like happened in Joplin. And it's the same kind of picture, just spread over more miles with what hit the Mid-South and parts of Southern Illinois. And my heart just aches for those individuals who lost loved ones, for the loss of all their possessions, having to put their lives back together. And the insurance equation is what seems always missing when the reporters do stories about these, that particularly the renters tend to have no coverage. It's very rare for renters to have coverage. And renters insurance is dirt cheap, typically $10 to $20 a month, a little more, a little less. And that's something that I want renters to get coverage. Homeowners often complain about their homeowners insurance premiums and don't have enough coverage. They'll have really low deductibles, but not enough coverage. You want to have high deductibles on your homeowner's insurance, so you only make a claim for catastrophic things, but a lot of coverage there to help you rebuild when that becomes necessary. You heard me say when, not if. Because over the course of a lifetime, odds are our number's going to come up at some point. And it's not the lucky lottery, it's the unlucky. So you have to be prepared with the proper homeowners and renters insurance for the unexpected.
Great, I think, takeaway for all of us. Well, let's somehow try to turn that frown upside down to end this piece. It's always an awkward transition for something just that puts a pit in your stomach, like the events of the last couple of weeks have. But if we're going into 2022 now, right? We've talked about the 5 lessons of 2021. Thank you so much for that. But if you're setting people's mindset on next year and where our head needs to be, Mr. Howard, where
Mr.
you tell
Howard,
them
nobody calls me Mr. Were you just trying to insult me? I am just plain old Clark. That was terrible.
I gotta tell everybody too. I accused you of drinking earlier, and I just like nothing more fun than poking Clark Howard. And by the way, I was telling somebody the other day that hadn't seen this, and for people that don't know this, when Clark went to the Super Bowl, my favorite piece of social media was Clark has a picture of him at the Super Bowl, and he is, rather than going to the concession stand, he is a reusable bottle at the drinking fountain because he values the event, but he doesn't value a $15 cheeseburger. And
you were so right. I never ate or drank anything other than the water I brought when I was at the Super Bowl. And maybe if I would have bought those concessions, the Falcons wouldn't have caved to the Patriots. But
it was all your fault. It's like putting your socks on, the left one first, then the right one. If Clark would have bought the damn cheeseburger,
everything would have been fine.
But I think that's great. Spending money on what you value. I think that's a good takeaway that I've had from being a fan of yours for so long. But going into 2022, Clark,
right? I'll tell you what it is. People don't really grow till they're tested. And if I'd say there's something that's happened the last 2 years, we have all been tested. I mean, just look at the anger problems we're having on airplanes with people deciding they're in a boxing ring instead of on an airplane. And the way people are not driving as well as they were. It's all anger and frustration coming out of people. But what will emerge is people will learn that they have dealt with extremely difficult circumstances for 22 months, and they're going to be fine. And you go on with life. And we are going to be fine. Every time through humanity, no matter what has been thrown at people, we do find how resilient we are. And so I think as you think about the new year, obviously we want 22 to be better than 21 or 20. But ultimately, we're going to be better because we have had to overcome. And that's what I'm so optimistic about, is we are more capable than we ever give ourselves credit for. And I will believe that to my dying breath.
I would be remiss while I have you here for just a moment to not mention the awesome podcast. It seems to be really, really fun. I mean, it is so fun. Just following you on the podcast. For people that have never heard, I don't know who's never heard the Clark Howard Show, but tell everybody about the show.
Well, I did a syndicated radio show for 20 something years, and I was really getting worried that we were not getting young ears anymore. And I want to reach people in their teens, 20s, and 30s where I can try to help them develop lifelong good habits with their wallet. And with radio, the average listener now in talk radio is like 68 or something. So, and I can say that because I'm 66. I can say that. But what we do with the podcast is geared towards a younger audience to make good decisions with their wallet day to day and over time, so that you have independence, so that you have, remember a few years ago, everything was about financial independence, retire early, the FIRE
Yes.
movement.
Yeah. Sure.
And that kind of faded into oblivion as a popular culture thing. But the idea of the financial independence, the first two letters, is what I'm really about, is that you, by making choices where you live on substantially less than what you make, you then have so much power in your life and what happens with your life. I mean, money's not everything, but money gives you the freedom to do other things. And that's why I'm so excited to do the podcast, because I saw stats not too long ago that our number one listenership in that time period was people 18 to 24.
That's awesome.
And I was like so thrilled about that.
That is fantastic.
Because that's who I want to teach. I want to reach. I want to teach. And I am the dullest person alive. You just got to know that. But the result of my dullness is that people get to have a lot of fun in their lives. That's the goal. Listen to the dull man, and great fun things happen to you.
And that's why I love ending the year with you, Clark. And I also got to tell you that my brother, he's like, oh, you got this podcast, it's fine, whatever. And I remember the first time that you and I were about to talk, and I told him, I said, yeah, I'm going to be interviewing Clark Howard. You're going to have Clark Howard on you. All of a sudden my show became something because I talked to you. So,
so your brother is dull like I am. He has no life. That's what he's excited about.
I'm saying my brother's a smart human being, my friend. Very smart human being. And by the way, we will link to the Clark Howard podcast, or you just find it wherever you're listening to us now. Just hit pause, go subscribe to the Clark Howard podcast, because you can hear already how much fun you're going to have listening to the tall guy. Clark, have a happy new year, my friend, and a great 2022.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This was really fun.